you, Dr. Ferguson, for that introduction. I'm assuming everyone is able to hear me all right. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. So I'm actually gonna just share my screen. I did make a little PowerPoint. I thought it'd be easier to have it just to follow through. So let me just share. Okay. Are you guys all able to see my screen or the screen that I shared? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay. Right. So thank you again for Beta and Dr. Ferguson for the opportunity for me to share my experiences today. And so like Dr. Ferguson mentioned, I'll just be talking about my experiences in UCLA, in OCC at UCLA, and kind of all the experiences that led me to where I am today here. And I'll also be talking about some of the research opportunities that I was able to get involved in. So like Dr. Ferguson mentioned, I started my college academic journey at OCC. So I was there from 2019 to 2021. And I guess I'll just start off with why I chose OCC. And just because there's several reasons. One is there's great professors and classes. I was able to complete my prereqs. And I didn't need to go to a different college to complete them. I've heard from some of my friends that they had to go to different colleges to complete their prereqs just because some of the classes weren't offered at their college. So I think OCC has definitely a great variety of classes available. And also there's great support from professors. So one-on-one office hours, I would highly encourage everyone to take advantage of that, either just to ask a bit more about materials or just to build relationships and bonds. And also part of OCC is there's the transfer admission guarantee program. Just like, for example, if you complete certain prerequisites, you're guaranteed an admission at certain UCs. And I thought that was really great. My goal at that time was just to transfer to a UC. So I didn't really think about CSU and all that. I was mainly focused on transferring to one of the UCs. And then also there's honors program where you get a priority admission to transfer colleges. I was enrolled in that, and I kind of also joined the TAB program and the UC Irvine transfer honors program. These programs are not, so they don't guarantee admissions, but they do increase your chances of getting enrolled in either UCLA or UC Irvine. So if those are one of the colleges that you're interested in, I would highly encourage you to learn a bit more about the programs and see if that's something you're interested in. And also, there's multiple research opportunities. I know there's the Gauss T. Brown Student Project and Research Symposium, and that's a great way for you to share your a topic that you're interested about. I'm not sure if it's still a requirement, but I know when the last time I was at OCC, we did do a kind of like a student project in the experimental methods class. And so if you'd like to present your findings, that's a really good platform. And also, like Dr. Ferguson mentioned, there's the Beta National Research Project. So during that year, it was during kind of like the beginning of COVID. So we were able to use our data to study, how COVID, the pandemic affected kind of well-being and mental health in general. And also, this is something that I was also involved in at OCC. It's not part of OCC, but it was during my time at OCC. So it's the crisis text line. I think it's a really great opportunity for those who are interested in interacting with individuals from diverse backgrounds and just want to gain an exposure to a broad range of issues that people experience. So it's a remote opportunity. So you don't have to, you can just be involved in it online. And through that, you actually learn how to navigate difficult conversations. So I've had people that I talked with, so it's mainly through text. So you're just typing your response. It's not actually a verbal response. I know there are other services that offer kind of like a phone call kind of thing. So for crisis text line, what we do is people who are experiencing kind of distress or mental health problems, they will text in. And then as a crisis counselor, your responsibility is to kind of provide support and de-escalate the crisis and kind of help them work through kind of their problem-solving skills. It definitely helps to build empathy and humility. And I think a lot of the skills that I learned from this position translate to my research setting as well when I interact with participants who are going through rough times. So it's a great opportunity to put it out there. And so after OCC, I went to UCLA. So I was there from 2021 to 2023. And I know and also as well, when I was at OCC, I was really anxious and nervous about, what a four-year college is like, whether I, have a smooth transition there and all that. So just wanted to summarize some of my experiences there. This may not be applicable to all UCs across the board. I just wanted to share my personal experience. So first is just what to expect. 2 years fly by really quickly. It may not seem like it, but it does. And so I definitely encourage to keep an eye or keep track of your academic plan. For example, is there a minor that you're interested in? And if so, do those minors require an application? Lots of the minors do not, but some of the minors do. So at UCLA, I minored in brain and behavioral health. So it's a minor that kind of combines the field of psychology, neuroscience, human biology and society, and psychiatry. So it's kind of like an intersection of all of that. And to be part of the minor program, you have to apply, and you have to apply in your third year. So you can't apply in your fourth year. They don't accept applications if you're a fourth year. So just trying to get a sense of, what are the deadlines, and just trying to, if that's something you're interested in, and just trying to make the deadline. And also, what kind of experiences would you like to get out of undergrad? So like I mentioned, I'm really interested in research, and that kind of began from my research experience in OCC, and I wanted to explore more about it. And so I did start looking for labs, research labs to get involved in once I got into UCLA. Typically, I think labs generally want a bit more longer commitment, especially for labs that use more advanced technology. So for like fMRI labs or EEG labs, and those require more technical skills, they would tend to prefer students in their sophomore year or junior year, where they're able to train you and you're able to stay in the lab longer. But there are also other labs where you can join if you're overwhelmed with classes and you want to focus on your classes, and then later on join a lab. That's also an option. And also, so at UCLA, we go by a quarter system. So a quarter system is about 10 weeks. And that's like about a month plus less than a regular semester. So classes actually go by really quickly, and which is both a pro and a con. So pro is you get to end your classes quicker. Con is you just have to keep track of deadlines. And some of the clubs that you want to join, they may also have interviews, application cycles, and that's something to keep in mind. And also class sizes are bigger because it's a four-year university. For large lectures, usually there's like about 100 to about 300 students in a class. So that's a lot of people. So you get less one-on-one with professors. Usually you get more interactions with the graduate student TAs. And that's when you have lecture sections and discussion sections. So lecture sections are where the professor talks about the topic, and then in discussion sections, the graduate student TA will kind of guide you through the materials, and that's where you get most of the interactions. So that's just kind of basically or like an overview about how four-year institutions are. And next, I'd just like to highlight some of the research labs that I was involved in, just to give you a sense of kind of how human behavior is being studied in research settings. I think it's really fascinating to me, just because we don't learn it a whole lot. Like, or you learn it theoretically, but not kind of see it happening. So I first joined at the Memory and Lifespan Cognition Lab. So this is a picture of the lab. It's led by Dr. Castell. So that's him in the center, and all those by his side are his graduate students. And so this lab is mostly within the cognitive psychology field. So it's more about, how do we learn? How do we remember things? And there's two main research questions that the lab focuses on. One is, how do we prioritize which information to remember? And one thing they find consistent is that we are better at remembering information with higher value. So if that information is more important, we tend to remember them better. So you can think of it like, you have, like, for example, when you're studying for a test, professors may give you kind of a list of topics to focus on. And so you focus on those topics, you remember the materials better. And also, the lab was also interested in looking at if this memory selectivity, so whether we're able to remember information with higher value, differs across the lifespan. And that's because some of the controversial, or not controversial, but kind of the traditional view is that, as you get older, your memory isn't as good as younger adults. And what they found is that older adults are actually more selective, and they're better at focusing on what's important. So that's contrary to what we believe, and I thought that was really interesting. And just a brief, just to show you kind of how they study it. They kind of pair stimuli with point values. So bell is a stimuli, and it's paired with a point value, a 10 point. And then they'll show you all these stimuli paired with a point value. And after that, they'll ask you to recall. So they'll say, what are the words you remembered from, the slides earlier? And then you have to write down the words that you remember. And then from that, they can see, are you remembering the words with higher points or words with lower points better? And I just wanted to point out one of the more significant paper in the lab, which I thought was really interesting, and maybe it's something that we can all relate, is the Apple logo study. Maybe we can try to do an interactive activity here. So without looking at your phones or laptops, I do have 6 figures here, and you can take a look and try to guess which one is the Apple logo. Is there anyone that thinks it's A? If you would just want to raise your hands. Okay. Anyone who thinks it's B? Okay. All right.
Sure. Go with that.
Okay. And who else thinks it's C? Okay. How about D? E? Any E's? Okay. All right. And F? Anyone who thinks it's F? All right. Thank you for participating. And actually, those who selected either one of the 6, none of the 6 are correct. So this is the real Apple logo. It's a little different. The leaf is different. The bite mark is on the different side. And then there's kind of like a design. Right. Oh, sorry? Oh, okay. Did someone wanted to say something, or? Okay, all right. There's just 3 characteristics from the apple, the leaf, the bite mark, and then the design at the bottom here. So you have to get all 3 right. And if you don't remember that, that's totally fine. So they did the study. It's cited here at the bottom if you're interested in learning more about it. When they asked people to draw it, only 1 out of 85 were able to draw it correctly. when they ask them to recognize it, so giving them, for example, 6 or 7 figures and asking them to point which one is the Apple logo, fewer than 50% of the participants were able to correctly remember it. And also, interestingly, people think that they know the logo, so they're more confident in knowing the logo. And this confidence is different. So if you ask them before they draw the task or they draw the Apple logo, they're more confident. If you ask them after they draw the Apple logo, they're less confident. This result didn't differ between Apple or PC users. So I thought this was really interesting. And kind of the conclusion they gave was, the more you see something in your daily life, the more you learn that it's unimportant. And so you pay less attention to the details, so you're less likely to remember the details. So that was just one line of research as part of the lab. Another lab that I joined was a more clinical lab. So this is a different area of psychology. And this lab was the Anxiety and Depression Research Lab. Their main goal was to kind of understand the factors underlying depression and anxiety and to develop effective treatments. And so with the current, technology craze going on with ChatGPT, AI, VR, I just like to highlight 2 studies that are going on within the lab that I thought was really interesting and offers a different perspective in how we study human behavior. So first is, as part of this lab, they are currently conducting a study, a VR training study, specifically targeting anhedonia. Anhedonia is a symptom of depression. It's characterized by loss of interest or pleasure in activities. And they're trying to use VR to enhance savoring of positive experiences and hopefully reduce symptoms of anhedonia. So that study is currently in the data collection process, and I thought it was really fascinating. Another one, a part of UCLA as a whole, is they have this UCLA Depression Grand Challenge. They have a site, if that's something you're interested in. So basically, their goal is to cut the global burden of depression on human health and well-being in half by 2050. And they do it in 2 ways. So one is by researching kind of treatments or mechanisms, and then disseminating the information to public. I know there was a really big study, I think that just concluded. So that study is using digital devices like smartphones, apps, wearables, including your Apple Watch and all that, to collect data, for example, on your sleep, on your physical activity, on heart rate, on your daily routine, and trying to associate them with symptoms of depression and anxiety. And so they're hoping that by doing so, they're able to better predict people who are at risk of developing depression, and they're able to intervene before it gets either more severe or before they develop a depression episode. So that's just 2 studies that are using technology. And also, as part of UCLA, we have this psychology departmental honors program, which is a program that allows you to independently complete an honors thesis. So you can either conduct your own study, and that means you're going to design the study, collect the data, analyze the data, and then report the data in the form of a research paper. Or you can conduct the analysis on existing data. So there's data sitting in the lab, you're just using the data, so you won't kind of design the experiment or recruit participants. And I think it's a great experience to just try your hands on in research and just trying to write out a full research paper. I thought that was really a really great way for, at least for me, to kind of know that research is really something that I'm interested in. And this is kind of our cohort, the picture there. And also UCLA has several conferences, and I think other UCs may have conferences as well. So there are various undergraduate conferences. I know we have a psychology specific conference, or a conference across all majors and disciplines. So there's just various opportunities for you to showcase your research project and things like that. And also, as part of, the research process, one important thing is, after you get the data, after you collect the data, is to disseminate the data. And there's two ways to do that. One is through poster conferences or attending conferences, and another is through publication. And I think UCLA has a pretty good team in terms of the Undergraduate Research Journal of Psychology. So this is a research journal that is peer-reviewed. It's mainly undergraduate run, but it's also, we do have faculty advisor and graduate student advisor. So what we do is we'll collect submissions from students, and then we're going to review these manuscripts. We're going to see if they're kind of worth publishing, whether it contributes to the scientific literature, and it's really a great opportunity to look on the other side of things. So instead of being kind of the person writing the manuscript, you're actually on the other side, kind of evaluating the manuscript. And it's also a good way to kind of learn about, how should you approach manuscript writing and kind of write up your results. And so that's a link if you're interested. I think you can also type Undergraduate Research Journal of Psychology at UCLA in Google. They do have a list of publications there from previous journals. Okay. And so after all of the experiences that I have, both at OCC and UCLA, particularly in related to research, I really wanted to kind of expand my skills more and just gain more research experience. And typically what we do is before you enter a graduate program, some students may opt to take a 2-year off from schoolwork and start a post-bac position. So that's where you're heavily involved in research full-time, just to gain more experience there. So that's what I did. I started right after I graduated from UCLA, and I'm still in this position now. So I was really interested in depression and anxiety, particularly in related to the risk factors, the mechanisms underlying it. And so I joined the Binghamton Mood Disorders Institute here. It's under the Binghamton University. And the main goal of this lab is to look at attention biases as a mechanism of intergenerational transmission of depression. And what I mean by intergenerational transmission of depression is that that depression is being passed down within the family. So if you have a family member that has depression, you're more likely to develop a depressive episode, either through biological factors or through parenting or other sociocultural factors. For example, you're living in the same neighborhood that has high crime risk, and all the other factors. So particularly, a lot of studies have been conducted on moms. So if you have a mom with a history of depression, you're more likely to develop a depressive episode. I think the reason for that is just because traditionally moms are the primary caregiver. They tend to interact more with the kids, and so kids have more exposure to moms. So the way we study it is we take in people from the community. We take moms, and they're 7 and 14-year-olds, so one mom and one kid per family. The moms have to be either never depressed at all in their lifetime, or they have a history of depression during their kid's life. So it could either be a postpartum or anything after their kid was born. And then we bring these moms in, and we study them by letting them complete questionnaires. We do diagnostic interviews. So that's where we'll ask them about specific symptoms of different disorders. And at the end, after the visit, we'll come together and look at all the symptoms and decide, do they meet diagnostic criteria for a certain disorder? So that's different from self-report. There are also self-report measures that are able to look at kind of number of symptoms instead of a diagnosis. So we do that. We also do semi-structured interviews. So we'll ask them, for example, in the last 6 months, was there anything that was a change for you? And by asking that, we're getting at, stressful events that may have happened since the last time they were here. We also study this through eye tracking. So this is an example. There's 4 faces on the screen. These faces, on the actual task, there are different emotional expressions. So there's happy, sad, angry, and neutral. And the way we do it is we let participants look at these different faces and we track where the participants are looking. So are they looking more at the happy faces, more at the sad faces, or just not looking at any emotional stimuli at all? Because attention biases is a big focus of our lab, we also do it through mobile eye tracking. So we have kids and moms wear these glasses. In the middle of the glasses, so just right here, just right above the nose, there's actually a camera. So when they wear these glasses and interact with one another, we can take a look at where they're looking at. And from that, we can actually code whether they're looking at mom or looking at somewhere other than mom, and tracking their attention. We also do EEG, so just looking at neural markers that can tell us whether they're attending to things or not attending to things or attending less to things. We also do psychophys, so we look at sweat conductance, heart rate, facial affect, just to see, whether what they attend to is linked to physiological changes in the body. And so there's multiple ways that we study attention biases, and it's actually a longitudinal study currently. So we bring kids and moms in 5 times over 2 years, every 6 months, in order to track the trajectory of their either attention biases or symptoms and things like that. And so it's a really interesting project. And I do have data from a previous study that they did, which is very similar to this study. And so when we look at attention biases, we know that from the literature, those people or kids who are at risk of depression, or actually people, they're usually done on college students, are more likely to attend to sad faces if they're at risk for depression. But we haven't studied it developmentally, so from kids to adolescents, how that changed. And so here is the age of the kid. On the y-axis is the proportion of attention to sad faces, specific to sad faces, because we know sad faces is associated with depressive symptoms. So on the blue line is showing offsprings of mother with depression. And on the orange line is offsprings of never depressed moms. And the highlighted region just kind of reflects significant group differences. So what we see here is that kids and children specifically are looking less at their mom if their mom has a history of depression. And we're not sure why this is the case at the moment, but I think what we think is happening is that it's because of emotion regulation. So they're looking away from mom, maybe because mom is showing sad faces, and that makes them feel, doesn't make them feel good. And so that's why they look away from it. And you see this direction to flip after adolescence. So in adolescence, in older kids, they're actually looking more at their mom or more at sad faces. And again, we're still not sure why this is the case, but we believe that it's because adolescence is a period where there's increased stress, either, during puberty, either with friends or just having to cope with the changes in your body. And there's also increased rumination. So that leads to this attention towards sad faces. So this is also something we're planning to study more in the current grant that I'm helping with. We're kind of seeing whether this reflects to real world interaction between kids and moms. And then this also at the bottom, there's a citation of the article if that's something you're interested in reading a bit more about. And also, so that's pretty much it. I think in the interest of time, I'll just skip through some of the slides that I have here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm open to any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to ask a couple of things. So you said you got involved with a bunch of like research projects. Like, what was the process with that? Like, how did you get in touch with these professors? How did you like apply for them? Stuff like that.
Right. Good question. I think there are multiple ways to do that. First is you could go to the psychology department faculty website, and then you look at individual faculty. Usually on the faculty profile page, they have their labs linked there. You can click into the lab, and usually in those lab websites, they have a section where they're saying, you know, if you're interested in joining the lab, this is how you can reach out to us. That's one way. Another way is, and this may be specific to UCLA, but for us in the fall, we have events hosted by the graduate student where it's an event where graduate students or labs who are looking for undergraduate research assistants are going to post kind of like do a job posting kind of thing or volunteer posting. And then in that Zoom section, they have multiple different openings. They have the, you know, time commitment of the lab, a brief description about what the project is about, and then they'll also tell you, you know, how you can apply. And if, you know, if there's a professor or their professor with research interest that you're really interested in, but you can't find their lab information or lab page or anything like that, it always doesn't hurt to just reach out to the professor saying, you know, hey, I'm interested in your research, and I'd like to volunteer in your lab. Are you looking for any undergraduate research assistant, or is there any way that I can get involved in the lab? There's multiple different ways, but those are kind of the main ones that I am aware of. Yeah.
One more. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also planning to transfer to UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
How was like when you started transferring? Like when you got there, what did you think of it?
I think it was great. Definitely a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness. I think, especially as a transfer student, I just want to normalize this. Having imposter syndrome is a very common experience.
I know exactly what you mean.
But I think you slowly learn, either through your interaction with people or through classes, that, you know, colleges accept you because they think you're going to be a good fit for their campus. And so you're there for a reason. And so what I do is I just try to make use of the different resources available to just build my skills. I see it as a learning opportunity in terms of just growing as a scholar and both as a researcher as well.
No regrets. UCLA.
No, not yet, at least in terms of realizing it.
Right.
Any other questions? Yes.
Is there any requirement for applying those assistants at the lab?
I think a lot of them is just in terms of your hours commitment. So how many hours are you able to commit? They do have some requirements there. Some labs require you to commit like 7 to 8 hours or 8 to 15 or 8 to 10 hours. So there's that requirement. A lot of them will require your CV. So kind of just a document showing your education history, your research experience, and all that. And also sometimes also a cover letter. So a cover letter is just like a formal letter explaining why you want to be in this lab, what are the skills that you can bring to the lab, and how do you show like, I'm committed and, I have these skills that I built that will be helpful for me. If you're, I think, if you have done like a project, a student project at OCC, either through your experimental course or something independent, you can also highlight that and say, hey, I've had experience with the whole research cycle from the literature review to developing the study, collecting data, analyzing it, and writing it. I think that's a really good skill to have. Sometimes they'll kind of ask you to explain about your project as well. So it's good that you know what you found, what are the next steps that you may want to take for that project and things like that. But I don't think there's really any hard requirements other than the commitment hours.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm also doing a kind of like student project for Python Pepper, which is called Honor in Action, HIE research project. And we are right now conducting a research and we're planning to do an interview. And I want to ask like, how do you design an interview when you do research?
Sorry, how did I want to decide?
How do you design an interview when you're doing the research?
Oh, design an interview?
Yes.
I think a lot of it is you look at past literature on the project. So if there has been studies done in this field or in this topic, you want to look at the paper, you want to look at the questions they ask and just try to be consistent throughout that. Or some of the interviews are also standardized, so kind of like semi-structured. They have certain questions that you have to ask. Maybe you can ask a bit more, like for more details, but there are specific questions that you will ask participants. But I think generally the rule is to look at the literature and see what are some of the questions that are asked. If it's not in the literature, I think you can develop your own. But I think like you may want to validate it or something like that, just to make sure like the interview questions are not biasing participants' response in any way, kind of things like that. Yes, I see a hand.
Hi, so I want to ask, like, what are the most like difficult aspects of research for you, right? Like from when like you just started your work in research and like where you are right now.
That's a good question. I think when I first started out, the most difficult aspect was kind of just putting all the theoretical skills that I learned in class, like in stats class and in research and in experimental methods class, to practice. Like, the theory, how do you kind of, like, for example, what t-tests are, what ANOVAs are. How do you use that in real data that you've collected? That was something that I think that was a difficult aspect when I began research, and also how to write kind of a research paper. I think right now at this point, I think the most difficult aspect is stats, because I know in a lot of stats class we focus on, at least from what I remember, t-tests, ANOVA, descriptive stats, and all that. When you're analyzing, for example, more complicated data, for example, longitudinal data, where for each participant you have multiple data because they come in multiple times. How do you analyze those data? I think that is something that I'm still working on, and it's something that I really want to build on as I go further in my career. I also think if you're starting research, I don't know if this is something that may be a good news or bad news, but programming is very important in research. I know currently R programming is becoming very popular in terms of cleaning your data and analyzing your data. Just because some of these softwares like SPSS, they require a license fee. And so some labs may not have that software available. They may choose to use R, which is free. And also, if you're more interested in kind of EEG, so neural markers, or fMRI, kind of brain imaging things, I think the more popular coding language for that is MATLAB. And also, I think Python is becoming very popular as well. This was something I didn't know going into research. I know for UCLA, I think during my time, and I'm not sure if it's the same now, but one of the prereq was you needed one programming language class. I took a Java course and I thought I was done with programming, and turns out I was not. So, so it's just good to build that skills and to just learn if you have the opportunity.
So I have a question, Amber.
Yeah.
So did you, because I have another student that's at UCI now, and he's like all statistics gung ho. He's actually doing his second year at UCI. And so he's actually gonna come talk to us in a few weeks, and he was talking about like, oh no, you gotta get your students doing R. I'm like, I'm not gonna. No, that's way beyond what I want to do.
Right.
But did you take then advanced statistics at UCLA, like a more advanced statistics class than you had here at OCC?
Yes, I did take a statistic class. I think it's required, but I think in terms of the material, it's pretty much similar to what I had, what I learned at OCC, maybe just slightly a bit more advanced in terms of it used R more than SPSS. So that was something I had to get used to.
Yeah, a lot of them are using R. We're actually, I've gone to using JASP, which is free to use instead of
Right.
because I don't want to do programming, so, and I don't want to teach students programming, so.
Right. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to hear. And then do you feel like you're doing calculus-based statistics now?
No, actually,
Okay.
which is a great thing. I think the more complicated thing that I did was I analyzed longitudinal data, so I had to learn how to nest the data. And that was a little challenging in terms of grasping the theory behind it. But I haven't gone to the point where I needed calculus-based stats yet.
UCLA doesn't even need calculus for transfer. Yeah, that's why. And also, like, so validating to know that you're still having trouble choosing what statistic like set to choose. I'm
Right.
frustrated with that. Oh my God.
Yeah, which I think I really appreciate my current advisor now. He's really strong on stats. So I can trust him if he says to run this test. I'm like, good, I will do it. So it's good to have a mentor who's really strong in stats because I think I didn't realize it before too, but we talk about this sometimes in our lab meetings, but sometimes some papers tend to use maybe an inappropriate statistic methods that changes the results of the study. And these studies are in the literature. So I think ensuring that you're using the right statistical method is important in terms of having accurate results. Yes, I see a hand at the back.
Part of the lab, is it competitive?
I would say yes, it is competitive. At least, well, I don't know how many people applied to the lab that I was involved in, but in the current postbac position that I'm in, I sit in on some kind of interviews for undergraduate research assistant. And yes, it is quite competitive. It's about at least 100 people apply, or 100 people apply and we interview only maybe 10 or 15. A lot of the times, it's also not because you don't have the skills or not because you're not fit for it. Sometimes it's because of your schedule as well. So in the current lab I'm in, we're doing more of moms and kids. They tend to come in after school. So we want people who are available after 3 and until maybe 7 or 8. If you have class during that time, we're less likely to take you in. So there's just different considerations for different labs. So yeah, but I would say it's pretty competitive, but if you don't get in, don't be discouraged. There are also different labs out there, other labs that may not be posting for undergrads, but may be willing to take you in as a volunteer research assistant. So that means you're not earning any course credit, you're just helping around, running participants or things like that. And just also, maybe, there's certain aspects of psychology that you're interested in, maybe going into or after transferring. So for example, if you're after transferring, you're very interested in depression, for example, but depression labs are not recruiting or they're not looking for any undergraduate research assistant. I would say try to keep your options wide open. You can always join other labs. I think skills tend to be transferable across labs. So for example, if you're in an fMRI lab, but fMRI isn't something you're interested in later on, that's also a good skill to even have and to put on your CV. So a lot of technical skills that you can gain, even though the topic may not be something within your interest kind of thing. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Is there any extracurricular that you do for UCLA other than like crisis task line?
Sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Could you repeat that?
What kind of extracurricular activities did you do at UCLA?
Okay, thank you. I think I was more focused on getting more research experience. So I didn't do a lot of extracurricular activity. I did 2 research labs. I was in the journal. It's kind of like a society extracurricular. And I was also in Psychi. So it's like Psi Beta, but for a 4-year institution. So that was pretty much the extracurricular activities that I was involved in at the time. But I know there are multiple different labs that can cater to your interest.
Got into UCLA, like what did you do at OCC?
Oh. What did you do at OCC to get into UCLA besides the TAP program?
Right. So aside from doing honors classes and getting into kind of the TAP program, I did focus a lot on getting like kind of preparing my skills. So I did like research projects and things. I did the one research project, the Psi Beta National Research Project, and also the project in the experimental methods course. And I highlighted that in my application. I was like, hey, this is the project that I'm doing. Just to show that, kind of I'm able to, or I have the skills that I'm willing to go beyond what I'm learning in class to just apply those skills and things like that. So I think those 2 were probably the main things that I highlighted. Like when you're talking about your honors classes, instead of saying I took XYZ honors classes, you can tell a bit more about what the honors classes taught you. Like, for example, taught you to take a interdisciplinary approach to things. And I think those are some things that the reviewers are going to appreciate more. So what you learn from those class rather than listing, here's what I did and here's what I did next and things like that.
Well, she was also Psi Beta secretary. I can't remember if you held any other positions.
I was in the student association. So I joined the interclub council, and then I was kind of like a student representative for several committees.
Yeah. You want to remember that when you're applying to PhD programs, you got to dust off those cobwebs and remember what did I do? I also
Right.
Make sure that's all on your CV, right?
Right. Right.
You might not think it's important, but to see that, oh wait, she was involved, especially like as you go off and you apply to start like teaching position, they want to see somebody who cares about the school, not just the research, right? So, because faculty have to do more than just teach and do research, so.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and also, speaking about that, I think this is starting to starting to bring up my memory. At UCLA, I was also involved in the transfer student representative. So it's like a council within the student the larger student council, specifically targeted for transfer students in terms of, you know, giving transfer students the resources and support they need. So I was involved in that for my first year. And then my second year was more focused on research.
So based off of the involvement you had at OCC, did you win any of the awards, the scholarships and stuff that they put forth at the end? Like, I know you probably got the service award.
Right. Yeah.
So.
You mean like awards at OCC?
Yeah, they have, they have the service and the scholarships at the end of the year.
Right.
Nice.
Honors night, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
she was virtual, right? It was still virtual then.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
she's the first Siberian National Research Project, and Amber, it's a whole different world now. I have a whole different perspective and understanding of it. It's much easier when you're meeting with people in person.
Right.
But,
Yes.
so, if you're not like a research heavy student, what kind of options do you have? What can you do in the field of psychology at UCLA if you're are not a research heavy student?
Yeah, good question. I think there are several different options. For example, you could go more into like in terms of the field of psychology, there's many options in terms of, you know, law, or business, or a counselor, or going more into therapy kind of thing. In terms of opportunities for those, I know there may be certain societies that are able to cater to that. I'm just not very or super aware or have a good understanding of them. But there's definitely various options or resources available at UCLA that can support, you know, kind of if you're not interested in kind of the research route for psychology.
I would think if they probably have like, well, she did the crisis top line or whatever. That's one way to get some like for people experience, right? But I would guess at UCLA, they probably have some sort of class that's geared for people who want to go clinical, that where you go off and you volunteer, and they have specific groups that you volunteer with to get some personal, because I know they have that at San Diego State. It was in the social work group, but I'm sure they would have something like that at UCLA too.
Mhm.
It's UCLA, they must. They probably.
Well, one more, were there any like notable studies being conducted like on meditation and depression or UCLA or the more qualitative studies?
I think there may be. I think because I know I took a meditation class that kind of talked about meditation in science. So I believe there are studies that look into kind of the effectiveness of meditation in terms of reducing the stress and things like that. I'm just not able to cite them at the top of my head at the moment. But I think there are a few studies looking into that.
Questions? It's 3:30 and actually it's 6:30 for Amber on the East Coast.
Oh.
I know we had another guest speaker from the East Coast last spring, and he just kept going. He just kept going, and I felt bad because his daughter was in the background, and by the time he was done, I mean, some people left. By the time he was done, it was like, I think it was like 7:30 his time, because he kept talking. It was good. It was a good interaction, but
Right.
I felt bad for him. And his kid, who was probably starving to death.
Oh, right.
Oh, right. Right.
All right. Well, anyone else have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Amber. Should we give her a round of applause?
Thank you.
We really
Um,
appreciate you coming and talking to us.
yeah, no, it's my pleasure.
One more,
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it possible for me to contact you for any like questions related to UCLA and stuff?
Sure, yeah. I actually have a slide. I just forgot to turn it. So here's my email. It's a UCLA email, but I still have access to it. So you can still email me at that email address, and then I'll reply to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
and are you currently applying to PhD programs?
Yes, I'm working on the application right now. So it's been it's a good experience, but I think it's a little overwhelming too.
Yeah, East Coast, West Coast, anywhere?
I think a lot of them are on the West Coast.
Okay.
Even though I would like to, a lot of them are on the East Coast, sorry, but I would like to go back to the West Coast. So we'll see.
You're not anywhere near the storm, are you?
No. Yes. No.
All right, well, thank you very much. Haley, do you want to adjourn a meeting with your?